What if a piece of plastic held up under studio lights ended everything instead of a fight? Because Rasheeda anticipated conflict when she entered that reunion. She anticipated inquiries. She anticipated awkward excitement surrounding Jasmine Washington and Kirk Frost. Proof was what she had not anticipated. Jasmine didn't have any words. Based on what happened on stage, her pregnancy test was positive when she arrived, and everything changed at that very moment. Not because of what was spoken, but rather because of what was indisputable. There was silence in the room. Members of the cast froze. Cameras enlarged, and Rasheeda stood up before anyone could change the story. Got up and left the stage. There was no back and forth, no yelling, simply a polished exit that spoke more than any reunion speech could, because it usually indicates that the disagreement is already over when someone storms out rather than engaging in combat. Over, that's what set this particular scandal apart from all others. Rumors of cheating could be disputed. One could debate over timelines and offer an apology. But a pregnancy test that eliminates interpretation would be problematic. Additionally, the fact that it occurred live during a reunion, intended to clear the air, rather than off camera or posted online, made it more heavier. Rather, it exploded it. The same question was posed by viewers right away. Was the purpose of this revelation to be honest or to elicit a response? Because it is hardly impartial to bring something so intimate onto a public platform. It's tactical. It has corners. Everyone concerned, but notably the individual who refused to endure the suffering in public. Rasheeda's departure wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a rejection, refusing to take part in humiliation, an unwillingness to endure suffering in order to receive ratings, and perhaps a refusal to carry on with a marriage amid circumstances that were too serious to overlook. Therefore, why Rasheeda left is not the true question. That's why Jasmine decided to share it at that particular time. Everything remained gray until that moment of reconnection. Technical language, encased rumors, allegations, and denials. However, Jasmine Washington's second following a positive pregnancy test. The story moved from conjecture to certainty, because pregnancy is proof of continuance rather than just a single instance. Rasheeda didn't protest because of this. She didn't inquire. She didn't ask for clarifications. She didn't wait for Kirk Frost to say anything. She departed, and that choice conveyed an important message to the audience. Regardless of the exchanges that took place off camera, this disclosure crossed an established line. Pregnancy tests do more than just verify closeness. It verifies the timing. The timing is what causes narratives to fall apart. Timelines could be adjusted prior to this. It is possible to reject overlaps. Words that soften edges include separated, working through things, and misunderstood. However, spin has no bearing on a pregnancy test. It presents a clock, and clocks are truthful about order. The room's reaction was caused by this. Members of the cast took their time speaking. The presenter paused. Everyone simultaneously comprehended the same thing, causing even the customary discussion to pause. This was no longer reunion drama. This changed my life. Information disclosed in an environment intended for spectacle rather than consent. And there was the source of the discomfort. Reunions are intended to ease tensions rather than cause permanent harm. By adding a pregnancy test to that, Jasmine shared more than just news on stage. She had someone face it in public before they had a chance to think about it in private. The audience was split over that decision. While some perceived honesty, others perceived an ambush. The question shifted from if the pregnancy was real to why this particular moment was selected. Because there are numerous methods to reveal knowledge that could change someone's life. Maximum impact and maximum reaction were guaranteed by this one. That was not an angry response for Rasheeda. It was elimination. The only thing that maintained dignity was to walk away. If you had stayed, you would have had to respond on someone else's terms. Denied would have had to endure the spectacle of sitting in front of cameras while others analyzed her marriage, her future, and her suffering in real time. Because of this, the walkout was more impactful than any debate could have been. Kirk's response or lack thereof only increased the tension. He didn't enter the story right away. He didn't turn it off. He did not shield either side from the developing situation. Depending on their point of view, viewers interpreted that hesitancy in different ways. In any case, Rasheeda was left on her own in the aftermath. And it's terrible to be alone at such times. Additionally, every previous exchange between Jasmine and Rasheeda was reframed by the pregnancy test. Tensions from the past felt suddenly justifiable. The discomfort of the past seemed prophetic, and times that used to seem trivial became clear. This was a byproduct rather than a rivalry. The power disparity on that stage was also made clear by the revelation. Jasmine was in charge of the situation. The response was recorded by the producers. Real-time judging was done by the audience. There was only one control remaining for Rasheeda, so she took it off. This is why it didn't feel like reality TV. Consent is important even in public life, particularly in public life. Therefore, it felt like a line was being crossed. The reunion had failed to achieve its intended goal by the time the cameras cut. There was no resolution. Rather, something that could never be repaired in private was broken in public. This pregnancy test altered everything because of this. The pregnancy did not trigger the internet to blow up. The timing caused it to blow up. Viewers have already witnessed startling disclosures of marriages, secret children, infidelity, and reunions. However, respondents found it difficult to articulate why this particular time felt different until the A pattern emerged. This was more than just information exchanged. It was the deployment of information, and that distinction is important. As soon as Jasmine Washington wasn't simply being honest when she decided to disclose a positive pregnancy test on stage, she was picking the least negotiable, most visible time. Rasheeda's moment of powerlessness over the framing. No time to think things over, and no solitude to keep herself safe. Because there was more than just a revelation, audience sympathy changed very immediately. A power move caught their attention. Time conveys purpose more effectively than words could. There were numerous additional occasions when this information could have been disclosed off camera, in private, or even after filming was over, if the only objective was honesty. Selecting the maximum exposure, maximum response, and maximum suffering were guaranteed by reunion. Additionally, viewers saw that there was no debate on social media about the pregnancy's veracity. They were arguing over whether the disclosure was harsh, whether it went from being transparent to being humiliating, and whether reality TV should ever have someone deal with pain in front of viewers. The tone shifted at that point. Rasheeda's walkout was suddenly perceived as avoidance. It was considered self-preservation. The expression on her face prior to getting to her feet is recognizable. Not surprise, not perplexity, nor acknowledgement. The type that declares, "I know exactly what this is, and I'm not taking part," leaving Denny the instant it's supposed to pay off because it wasn't the test. It was the response. Confrontation is what makes reunions thrive. Raised words, tears, accusations, and breakdowns are what they rely on. Storylines culminate in this way. Rasheeda's departure prevented the moment from extracting what it was intended to. The whole situation was reframed by that rejection. Kirk Frost, meantime, became increasingly motionless. He refrained from interjecting. He didn't protect himself. He didn't redirect. The feeling that the moment had been allowed to proceed unchecked was heightened by the lack of interference. That was the last change for a lot of folks. It shifted from being about a difficult marriage to being about who was, and wasn't protected. Production did not protect Rasheeda. Her husband did not protect her. The knowledge that the only defense was to flee struck a deep chord, particularly with females observing. Additionally, the audience started to reconsider Jasmine's previous actions. Once empowering confidence now appeared to be insulation. Moments of intense laughter in retrospect, it felt different. It felt deliberate to keep quiet about boundaries. This has nothing to do with demonizing Jasmine. It was about identifying imbalance, since humiliation is not necessary for empowerment of another person. Additionally, empowerment loses its authenticity and becomes a spectacle when it is framed via the suffering of another person. Because of this reunion scene became a pivotal part in the narrative as well. But in confidence of the public. The format's ethics were questioned by viewers. Why are extremely intimate disclosures encouraged in settings where ratings take precedence over consent? Why is shock more important than compassion? And why are women so frequently expected to show their strength by quietly enduring these moments? Rasheeda did not survive. She made her own decision. And that decision caused the story in a manner that no debate could. It made the audience face an uncomfortable situation. That occasionally leaving is a more effective answer than fighting. By the ultimately, the pregnancy test was no longer the news story. The reason for the walkout was that it revealed the real price of public spectacle. It demonstrated what occurs when limits are disregarded in the name of authenticity. It also served as a reminder to viewers that once lines are crossed, they cannot be removed by editing. Even in reality TV, it wasn't simply what transpired on stage that made this event memorable. It was also what didn't. The room remained motionless as Rasheeda got up and left. No protective reset, no quick intervention, and no filming pause. That decision became a part of the narrative as the cameras continued to roll. Because quiet isn't appropriate in situations like this. Impartial, it's a choice. It wasn't Jasmine Washington disclosing the pregnancy test that many viewers found most unsettling. Kirk Frost did nothing to prevent the consequences. There was no attempt to stop the revelation. There was no obvious attempt to protect Rasheeda at the time. The lack of someone coming out to say, "This isn't the place," it struck more difficult than any confession. There is an implicit expectation in relationships, particularly in public ones, that the person closest to the harm will step in when it is about to happen. Kirk didn't, and if it was a shock, viewers saw it as abandonment rather than calculation or indecision. In this instance, silence was seen as consent. Permission for humiliation to become content, permission for the moment to unfold, and permission for Rasheeda to bear the emotional burden by herself. Because of this, a lot of fans began to portray this as treachery rather than a love triangle. That sensation was exacerbated by the production role. Reunions are strictly regulated settings. Subjects are props don't just happen. It wasn't an unexpected pregnancy test. it was permitted. This indicates that someone made a decision someplace, that this revelation was appropriate for television. And that choice is important because reality TV frequently conceals itself behind the notion of authenticity. This is their truth, and they decided to share it. However, when someone is obviously unprepared for what is going to happen, authenticity without consent is exploitation. The fact that no action was taken indicated that the moment was appreciated more for its impact than for its care. That viewers were incensed by this realization. Not everyone was angry on Rasheeda's behalf. They were angry at the system that allowed this to occur and at the notion that women should publicly absorb shock before quietly discussing their suffering. Rasheeda declined to play that part. She interfered with the production's plot by departing. Confrontation, settlement, or at the very least, emotional release were the expected outcomes of the reunion. Rather, it concluded with absence, which is more difficult to sell. Because of this, criticism persisted after the program was broadcast. Recaps and explanations did not satisfy fans. They demanded responsibility, not only from Jasmine or Kirk, but from the organization that put shock ahead of boundaries. That annoyance was only heightened by Kirk's quiet following the reconnection. There was no prompt explanation, no defense of the situation, and no public admission of how harmful it was for his wife. The damage appeared to be acceptable collateral due to the lack of response. And since this was no longer about adultery, people were unable to accept that. It has to do with exposure without permission. On a stage intended for amusement, a lady is made to comprehend facts that could change her life. It wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a systematic issue. Rasheeda's departure came to represent not only a strained marriage, but also someone who refuses to let their suffering become a source of satisfaction. The boundaries of reality TV's claim to authenticity were revealed by that rejection. Even though certain things are true, they shouldn't be shown on television in that manner. By the time the discussion shifted, the audience has already determined what was most important online: the inability to defend someone who didn't request to be placed in that situation, not the test or the dispute. Furthermore, the next episode does not restore that confidence once it has been betrayed. Something strange occurred after the reunion aired. The plot didn't continue to intensify. It came to a halt. No contentious social media disputes, no explosive interviews, and no grandiose attempts to recover the moment. And there was no uncertainty in that silence. It was a result. Rasheeda did more than simply leave a reunion when she left the stage. She came out of a story that was no longer useful to her. She completely refused to take part in public processing for the first time in this entire story during the walkout. Everything was altered by that rejection. Due to the audience didn't want to know what had transpired after that. They wanted to know why it was permitted to occur. And reality TV finds it difficult to respond to that query. The results of the pregnancy test couldn't be reversed. But the walkout gave it a new perspective. It became the moment Rasheeda made her own decision, rather than the moment Jasmine came clean. That distinction is important. In reality TV, power typically belongs to the person in charge of the situation. However, Rasheeda regained control at that precise moment by eliminating the scene. Just absence, no response, no conflict, no display of suffering. Absence also causes disruptions. Kirk Frost was left sitting in the aftermath, unable to change the course of the narrative. Jasmine Washington was left with a revelation that did not elicit the intended response. Additionally, it left production without a tidy conclusion. Because there were no answers at the end of the reunion, the moment still lingers. There was a boundary at the end. Boundaries are also awkward in areas designed with access in mind. It is not necessary to let what occurs next be decisive. The marriage cannot revert to its previous framework, whether it lasts or not. There is no longer a guarantee of public endurance. Private limits have been established. Furthermore, boundaries do not subtly disappear after they are upheld in public. Rasheeda's quiet afterward reads differently than previously because of this as well. There's no sense of passivity. It seems deliberate. She left after saying everything she had to say. Refusing to explain is sometimes the most forceful statement. This was more than a reunion. Moment there was a line being drawn and a line being crossed. This is the actual question. Did the pregnancy test give information about control or the truth? At what when does being genuine become a source of public humiliation? And why are women so frequently expected to show their strength by quietly enduring these moments? Rasheeda did not survive. She went out. She also revealed something more significant than a scandal by doing this. She revealed the price of entertainment that disregards consent and the influence of opting for non-performance over performance. It's up to you now. Did Rasheeda carry out the doing the right thing by leaving? Should production have stopped at that point? Additionally, where should the line be drawn between respect and reality? Let go of your ideas in the comments. Distribute this prior to its disappearance from the timeline, since the loudest times don't always describe a narrative. At times, it's the when a person declines to stay.